Welcome back to another episode of Limitless. I'm your host, Aaron Zucker, joined today by a man who has accomplished so much in really not that much time and really has built one of the more amazing companies that you'll hear about, and certainly one of the most impressive stories that we've had so far on our show. Rich Balot joins me from the great state of North Carolina, particularly in Greenville. Rich, how are you? Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much, Aaron. Happy to be here and doing wonderful this morning.
Good. Glad to hear it. And tell me a little bit, and for the listeners' sake, a little bit about your upbringing, where you grew up, and what your family dynamic was like.
I'm from New Jersey. Originally, I was born in New Jersey, moved to Greenville, North Carolina when I was 13 years old. So I've been in Greenville most of my life. Went to middle school here, high school for a few years here, went to the School of Science and Math in Durham, North Carolina. For those of you who know what that is, an amazing opportunity.
I saw in my social media algorithm recently that was rated the #1 public high school in America.
That's correct. When I was there, it was only number 2. I'm pretty sure I brought the average down, but now they're number 1. So it's an amazing school that the state of North Carolina provides as a residential public high school. So it was a really amazing experience. Graduated there, went to NC State for a few years, started multiple businesses along the way. We'll go back to that just in the education. Then graduated from East Carolina University in Greenville with a bachelor's in business administration. But my business side, which is a lot more exciting, is probably where you want to go.
Not yet, because we actually do we do a lot of foreshadowing. We do a lot of foreshadowing on the show. So tell us about your parents. You started off in New Jersey. What did they do there, and what spurred the move to good old Greenville, North Carolina, which had to have been quite a bit of an adjustment for a Jewish family from New Jersey?
So both of my parents from the Northeast. Dad was from New York. Mom was from North Jersey. Dad was a car salesman most of my life. Before that, growing up, when I was very little, age-wise at least, he owned a men's clothing store. Eddie's Big and Tall was his men's clothing store. Before that, he worked at other clothes business. Then he switched to the car business. Mom was a registered nurse. And she used to primarily, when I was little, work night shifts at the casinos in New Jersey, and then switched over and became a jail nurse. So I might have gotten out of some issues at school by saying to the teachers, I'm sorry, but my mom was in jail yesterday and couldn't sign the paperwork. And they were a lot more forgiving when you told them that your mom was in jail, until they figured out my mom worked there, and then I got in trouble for that. But I never lied. They just assumed. But yeah, and when my brother and sister, I have an older brother and sister, they're twins. When they graduated high school in 1989 is when we moved to North Carolina. My sister was going to Clemson University, and my brother was going to Old Dominion in Virginia. So we moved in the middle. And the criteria for moving down south was we had to find a place, as you understand, being a 13-year-old Jewish boy, that had a synagogue so I could get my bar mitzvah. And Greenville, North Carolina was one of the few towns in the eastern part of the state that had one. We were originally going to go to Virginia Beach, and then we realized there was a lot of traffic there. And the reason they moved down south, one is because my brother and sister were going to college down here, but two is they were tired of that 4-letter word, S-N-O-W, snow. They were sick of snow in New Jersey. And so that was that. And also we grew up on the Jersey Shore, so Toms River area. And so they wanted to get away from a resort area that, got super crazy during the summer and then, slow down the rest of the year.
And what did they do for work when they moved?
So mom was still an RN, so she got a job working for a Jewish doctor here in Greenville, just as an office nurse. And dad started selling cars down here, but he was not very successful selling cars because in New Jersey, he would sell more cars by himself at the big dealership he worked at than the entire dealership did in North Carolina on a monthly basis. So,
oh, wow.
Very different economics. So he was not successful, and more foreshadowing is part of the reason I started my career at a younger age was to help out the family.
What else did you do in your spare time? What were you into outside of school? I mean, obviously to get into science and math and then subsequently state and ECU, some things, you were doing some stuff outside of the classroom. What did that entail?
I mean, always into sports. I played football, wrestled, cheerleading in high school once we didn't have football as an option. Then, I was on the math team, math counts team. I was just on a lot of different academic, clubs, things like that. The first week I was in North Carolina, I won #1 in the Pitt County math competition. This is after not being on the math team until the week of the contest, and they had no clue I was smart. And then, we got the highest math counts team score ever for a team in Eastern Carolina, normally competing against like Charlotte and Raleigh. And so we scored really high on that. We had a great group of kids that I was with back then. So did a lot of the academic clubs, like I said, and particularly in the math side of the house. And then I'm in sports. It was actually challenging because, while a lot of athletes are smart, in my particular area, that wasn't the case. And so it was difficult because a lot of the practices were at the same time as the academic club practices, and the teachers weren't very good at sharing.
That's what happens when you're a big, strapping, athletic guy that's also super smart. How did you learn that you were this good at math? Is it something that came naturally to you, or did you work hard at it because you just grew a liking to it? I mean, this is not a common path for someone to go into entrepreneurship. You don't think, like, the two don't often pair up as well. So how did that come about?
I think a lot of it comes from, growing up in the household like we did. We like to play cards a lot. I mean, I actually learned to count ace, deuce, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, jack, queen, king. Years later did I learn there was 11, 12, 13. But so we played a lot of cards. We played this one game called Casino that had a lot of adding. And my parents just always loved doing mental math with me, my dad particularly. And so I liked math from a young age, and it's still with me today. I mean, math is a great base for everything else you do in business.
I'm certain I was not as good at math as you. My sister actually graduated from North Carolina School of Science and Math as well. And she always thought that I had this like natural knack for numbers. And I've always been able to, especially coming up in the real estate business, was always able to come out 3 or 4 or 6% of my head pretty easily. But I think a lot of that had to do with playing sports. And I observed my 5-year-old, who I'll play basketball with in the driveway now or whatever. And ever since he was 3 or 4, like, he would be able to tell me pretty quickly that 21 minus 3 was 18 because he was winning by 3 points. So I think that the added correlation to just be between going to practice or games and doing math mentally just to figure out how many fouls you had or how much you were down or whatever, and then subsequently going home and playing cards. I guess it's not totally shocking that you ended up thriving in the subject. So you go off to science and math, unbelievable academic institution. Then you choose to go to NC State. What happens with your journey there?
I'm not sure how much we're allowed to talk business, but I started, my second business while I was a freshman in college, and it was doing really well. But
what was your first business?
My first business was a mobile DJ business. So I started that when I was like 13 or 14. By the time I was 16, I had 7 employees, DJs, working for me full time. We were averaging 13 parties a week. And when I was 16, is the first year I netted over $100,000 while at home.
How did you get that idea?
Living with my parents. It's really simple. I used to call a radio station back then, to request music. And this one DJ said, dude, you got a great voice. You got a voice for radio.
You do have a voice for radio.
When I stopped my football career, which I don't mind telling you because you'll understand this, the reason I stopped playing football is I went from middle school where I was good to high school. And the first game at the high school was on a Jewish holiday, Rosh Hashanah. And I went to the coach and I said, Coach, look, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to play in the first game. And he said, look, if you don't play in the first game, you're not playing for me. And I said, I understand. He says, I knew you would. So I turned in all my gear, assuming that we had the same understanding. He thought I was just going to show up and play, but I didn't. And so I then went and called all the DJs in the phone book and said, hey, I want to be a DJ. And nobody would hire me. So I called back a second time and said, hey, I want to be a DJ. I'm 6'2", 250 pounds. I'm happy to carry your gear. And one guy said, okay, I'll hire you then. And,
there you go. You just needed the right interest generator.
That's it. And so I went and became a DJ. By the way, the coach did call me back a few weeks later trying to get me back playing football once he realized the Jewish holiday was actually important. And he apologized, but I said, sorry, Coach, I'm already making money now. I'm not going to be a pro athlete. I know that. I'm good, but I'm not pro. And so I'm going to stick with making money. And so that's why I started DJing. And I did DJ and radio for a little while as well. While I was in high school, I was on a 100,000 watt FM channel doing the night shift. But yeah, when I was 16, the first year I made $100,000 DJing as far as the net income. I'm past the audit period, so I don't mind saying that out loud. I might or might not have paid the right amount of taxes when I was in high school.
We'll keep that secret between us and our listeners, no problem.
It's past the audit period. I'm good now, right? So way past. But DJing did really good. My parents, you'll love this, by the way, my dad charged me double the mortgage to rent my bedroom in high school.
Holy shit! Why? He penalized you for doing well.
He said it was to keep me grounded. It was really, I think, because he was unemployed and needed the money, and I was making more money than both my parents combined by the time I was 16. So they made $72,000 the year I was 16. I made 100 plus. So yeah, that was how it worked, and I didn't know any better, so I paid it, which was great. He kept me grounded, and he helped me to book all the parties. When I was at school, he would answer the phone for me and book parties as well. He was a salesman.
Did you pay your dad a commission? Or was the double the mortgage? So you're paying double the mortgage and rent, and you're paying him commission.
$75 per party that he booked for me, and my average was $1,000 for a 4-hour party back then.
Okay, so 7.5%. I mean, yeah, that works. That's worth it to you while you're at school for sure.
But we were doing 13 parties a week, so he was making over $50,000 a year from me DJing, booking DJ parties.
And his answer was always yes. I'm certain of that. He didn't care if you had back-to-backs.
He was happy to get us very busy. By the way, remember, I couldn't drive back then, so I had to explain to people. I was big enough, I looked like an adult, But I'd always have to explain to people how my car broke down and my father was just helping me out. Because how do you explain why you're showing up to DJ at 14 years old, a wedding
There you
with
go.
somebody else driving you?
I am
it was
so
fun.
glad I interrupted you to ask you about your first business because that was great. So fast forward back to this. So the DJ business, I assume you just let it wind down when you went off to school.
No, I sold it when I was in my 20s. Sold it. I got tired of working 7 days a week. So I was DJing, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, working the cell phone business during the week, still going to school in the mornings. And it just got exhausting. And I said, this is just too much. So I called one of my DJs and I sold it to him.
Got it. Love that. So foreshadowing, second business, you're at NC State.
So look, my dad had been unemployed for a few years. My mom was likely to divorce him at the time. She was a nurse and tired of supporting him. She didn't realize how much money my dad was making off my DJ business. I assumed they talked, and unfortunately my dad also had a gambling issue, so he spent a lot of the money gambling. So I went to my brother and said, hey, Dave, I got an idea. I want to start a cell phone business because I bought my first cell phone as a DJ because where I live out in the country, DJing parties, back then, we didn't have MapQuest and things like that. And so people would be like, oh, go out
Rich,
to this
our
city
listeners, there's a lot of our listeners that don't even know what MapQuest is.
Fair enough. We didn't have navigation systems, whether it's on your phone, definitely didn't exist. And we barely had them online where you could use Google Maps to do a from and to and have it plot you the directions. So we used map books back then and people would, God, I sound old when I say this, but the directions in the eastern part of the state were even worse. So they would be like, hey, go to the big oak tree and turn right and then look for the red barn and make a left. Well, I would get lost all the time with directions like that, as you can imagine. So I bought the first cell phones for my DJs way back then and realized this was something big. These were back when they were installed in the car. They would drill through the roof of your car to mount an antenna on the top.
And not to age you further, but what year is this roughly?
I mean, you're talking, early 1990s, 92, 93, something like that. So in 1996 is when I decided to open my first cell phone store. And the main reason we did it was to give my dad a job so mom wouldn't divorce him since he hadn't worked in a few years.
And when you say we, this is your older brother, Dave, who's one of the twins.
Yeah, correct.
Are you at East Carolina or NC State this time?
I was at State as a freshman. It was a summer in between my high school and my freshman year is when I started the business. I had the idea. We started October 1st, 1996. So I just started school a few months prior. I went to my brother and asked him to join me primarily because in a Jewish family, even though my father was going to work for me, he was still my father. So if we had a disagreement, I was likely to lose, even though I was the owner of the business and he was working for me. But if I brought my brother in as my partner, I figured I had a chance, not a guarantee, but a chance. If the two of us both agreed on something, we could kind of outvote my dad, who, remember, worked for us. He didn't own any of the business, but he was still my father. And you understand that, I'm sure. So that's how we started the company, my brother and I. I liked the name ABC. I was ignorant about business back then because I liked ABC by the Jackson 5. I thought it'd be a good jingle for radio commercials.
Thank God most people will listen to this as opposed to watch it, but that's okay.
Yeah, I would agree with you on the dancing there. But but ABC phone stood for affordable beepers and cellular phones, the ABC. So we sold beepers back then. Most of your listeners have no clue what those are as well.
Yep. A beeper, for those wondering, is a 2 by 2 inch, give or take, rectangular, really, so like 2 by 4 inch rectangular device that was worn often on the belt clip for men or in the purse of a woman that would go off and a landline would call said thing and it would buzz or beep, i.e. call it a beeper, and the phone number would flash up on what number to call back. And then you would go to a payphone or another landline and return that phone call back. That is what a beeper was.
And by the way, I ask that question usually when I speak to college students. Like, does anybody here know what a beeper is? And then they raise their hand. I go, okay, good. Tell me how it works. And they're like, oh, I have no clue how it works. Like, it displays a number somehow. Yes, it does. But so we sold those and started the business. One store, Wilson, North Carolina, October 1st, 1996. And then started growing from there.
Share with us what you're comfortable sharing on the amount of stores or top line revenue or whatever it is that you're comfortable sharing with our listeners to understand what Victra has done in less than 30 years' time.
Yeah, so it was ABC Phones, now called Victra, VICTRA.com. And today we have over 1,500 Verizon stores. So we represent Verizon Wireless. So if you've been in a Verizon Wireless store, 1 out of about 4 stores in the country is mine. And then we also have about another 350, 400 total wireless stores, which is a prepaid brand that Verizon owns that we have as well. So all in, we're roughly 1,900 stores in all 50 states. And we do over $3 billion with a B in revenue a year. That's not profit. I wish. I'm not a billionaire. I'm not complaining. I've done well. But yeah, over $3 billion in sales. By the way, Aaron, I'm going to pause for a second and I want to rewind you back to something that I think you'll like. Okay.
Okay.
When I first started my DJ business, I had to go to my dad and say, Dad, I've been working for these other DJs, and the guy I've been working for, he's an alcoholic and he drives home drunk. And I want to break off and start my own company. And I'd like to do it. I'm going to need $3,000. My parents, we were poor. We lived in a 1,200 square foot house. And so my dad said, okay, I believe in you. I will go take a title loan against my car at 29.5% interest that you'll have to pay. But if you don't pay the loan, I lose my car and I won't be able to work. And so when I started my DJ career with the $3,000 title loan, that's what I started the whole business with. That then funneled in to become ABC Phones and now Victor today. And so $3,000 title loan, started the DJ business. $5,000 was the total investment we did to start ABC Phones between my brother and I.
I mean, if I had body hair, which I for some reason can't grow, the hairs would be standing up. I have chills looking. No, that's unbelievable. That is insane. So obviously you paid that loan down as fast as you could with the DJ profits, I would imagine.
Absolutely. It was paid off within a year. Dad was happy. I was happier. And then, like I said, from there, grown tremendously. And, like I said, over 1,500 stores today, over $3 billion in sales, employees in all 50 states, Verizon's largest retail partner.
How the hell did you grow to that?
So, look, started with one store, opened a second store, went to my father, actually, you'll love this, said, hey, Dad, I want to open a second store. He goes, what are you, crazy? You got one good store. What do you think? And I said, Dad, I've already signed the lease. I went to my dad. I said, Dad, I want to open a third store. I said, Dad, I want to open a third store. He goes, Rich, you get two good stores. Why are you pushing your luck? I said, well, Dad, I already signed the lease. I went to my dad on the seventh store and I said, Dad, I want to open a seventh store. He said, I think that's a great idea. I said, really? He goes, no, but knowing you already signed the fucking lease. Oops, I don't know if we're allowed to say that. I don't know if we're allowed to say that online. Hopefully
you can say whatever the fuck you want. How about that?
Got it. I like
that
it.
Was great. Oh my God. That was awesome.
So kept opening store after store, growing that way. Started off originally with US Cellular, who recently got bought by T-Mobile, by the way. After 13 stores with US Cellular, we dropped US Cellular, switched to Alltel, grew with Alltel for many years to 100 plus stores. Started doing acquisitions with Alltel. So I acquired a store that did well. I acquired 5 stores that did well, acquired 10 stores that did well, then pivoted over to Verizon when Verizon bought Alltel in 2009. And at that point, we had to reduce our company to switch. So we had to shut down 70 stores out of 102. So that was very painful because they were in the same parking lot.
You started in 1996 with one store. You do de novos, which is the Latin term for opening new stores. Then you do some acquisitions, meaning you're acquiring existing businesses with existing locations. You get up to 102. Then you decide to go all in on Verizon in 2009, which would take your store footprint from 102 down to 30, if I understood that correctly.
32, yeah.
32. What was the impetus behind doing that?
Well, Verizon bought Alltel.
Okay, so that's quite the curveball. How'd you hit that one?
And didn't see that coming. Went from no debt to having debt for the first time. Lost money that year because the business had to retransform so many things. So I had to pay off all the leases. Huge lesson, by the way. I had to pay off all the leases for the stores I closed. I now have a clause I put in all my leases called the inability to perform. That basically says if something like that ever happens again, I can pay a 6-month penalty and get out. But back then I didn't know that. And so we had to pay off all those leases and then, open new stores. It was a tremendous turnaround because I lost $13 million in 2009, which I never lost money in my life until that year. When it finally all hit me, I was in a hotel room traveling and I called my brother. My brother's never been an active partner. He's always been a silent partner. We talked business every single day. He would run doctor's offices and have the stable income in case anything went wrong. We developed a multi-pronged strategy to make sure that we could be not poor, basically. And I was taking the bigger risk, but he was supporting me. If things went bad, I could pull his income. And he was always signed on the line with me. And I remember one night I was at a hotel on the bathroom floor, and I finally just broke down. The stress was too much to call my brother and tell him, hey, D, we've lost $13 million, including a loan that we took from his boss. And, our CFO kind of didn't do the best of things. I didn't have a great CFO back then. And it's like, I don't know what to do. And, just need to tell you, get off my chest. And he's like, don't worry, we'll figure it out together. We'll turn it around. And we did. And that's after that, actually, that was a turning point in my career because I wanted to never lose money again. Pretty basic concept of business. I had to pay off the debt. And I also realized I had outgrown all my mentors and I needed new mentors and new ways of learning. And you'll appreciate this. I went and I was lucky. I had a next door neighbor named Eddie Smith. And Eddie is the owner of Grady White Boats and a member of YPO. and I didn't know much about him. I didn't know Eddie that well. I'd only moved in that year, and I called him up and I said, Eddie, I have some business challenges. I'd really like to talk to you. And he said, okay, come on over. And so I went to Eddie's house at 7 o'clock, stayed there till 11 p.m. one night at his house, literally right next door to mine. And Eddie's a good 30 plus years older than I am. And he told me about YPO for the first time. I'd never heard of YPO. And he told me about YPO and said I really needed to join YPO. And I ended up going to some events for EO and YPO to discover what they were. And that one event at EO is the first time I heard about a CEO coach from a speaker named Jack Daly. He talked about a CEO coach and a guy named Mark Moses. And so I ended up, after that, joining YPO that year, or the next year, I should say. And then I also ended up getting a CEO coach, which are the two things that I attribute for helping me really expand and grow my businesses and my ability to lead those businesses even faster.
There's a major takeaways there, right? Like you think about what 2009 would have done, not to mention the greater economic issues that were out there, which I'm sure was enough of a headwind on its own. But the fact that you had something completely out of your control occur, which forced you, not strategically, but forced you to go from 102 stores down to 32. And you lost $13 million. I can't imagine what that feeling would be like. But what does that say about your resilience to come back out of that hole? What does that say about your brother to be there and support you and say, hey, we're going to figure it out together and have a support circle to lean on? What does that say about how growth minded you are to recognize, like, all right, if I'm going to get my brother and I and my family and our company and all the people that are depending on us to perform out of here, how and where are we going to do that? And for you to have the humility, the tenacity, and the desire to go want to take on learning and resources, and candidly, I mean, from some standpoint, I would argue that you made your own luck, but you definitely got lucky in the sense that you found YPO and you found EO and you found Mark, who I've gotten to know through him interviewing you, which is an unbelievable experience. Another thing that, I've mentioned the word resiliency, I mentioned the word growth minded and staying positive. Those are some of our core values here. And then also talking about how you not only sought out the coaching, but then implemented the coaching, and it's turned out okay for you, if I understand correctly. So in 2009, which is not that long ago, 17 years ago, you're at 32 stores.
Yep.
There's obviously some peaks coming. So what happens next?
Yeah. So look, hired the coach. By the way, Mark didn't want to take me on. I think you've heard that story, but Mark refused to take me on as a client in the beginning, and I had to fly out to his house. And I said to him, Mark, I understand you won't take me after talking to him. I said, but I'm going to be in your neighborhood next week. Any chance we could have lunch? Remember, I live in Greenville, North Carolina. And Mark says, you're going to be in Newport Beach, California? I'm like, yes, I will be. I, of course, had no intention of being in California the next week, but I was. And after having lunch with Mark, I convinced him to take me on as a client. So that was a great lunch. Well, that's not part of this story today. So came back with Mark, joined YPO, have an amazing forum in YPO. And look, just kind of doubled down on what I needed to do, right? Mark helped me realize I needed to replace some of my leaders. There's only 5 things a CEO is supposed to do, and one of them is having the right team. And I did not have the right team. And so I had to, fire my best friend who was running sales and help him out with the soft landing course. Had to fire my CFO first, even, who was telling me I was going to go bankrupt. He wasn't wrong, but he wasn't helping me with the right information. And so rebuilt the team, and then slowly, turned the stores around. Really key relationships is one of the other 5 things that Mark stresses as the jobs of a CEO. Built that relationship with Verizon, and they helped me out and realized I knew what I was doing, that just their comp structure wasn't aligned with the way the business was, helped get that changed at the time, and pulled myself out of that hole, and then started growing as fast as I could, because I knew back then the iPhone was out. It had only been out for a year or two. It was AT&T. Verizon was rumored to pick it up, but they only let AT&T corporate stores and their one national agent or 2 national agents sell it. So I wanted to be one of Verizon's national agents. So I went and pitched hard to that program, but I had to grow. So in 1 year, we went back from 32 stores to 110 stores.
Holy shit. How did we do that?
All organic. I went to Verizon and said, I'm ready to grow. I've been at 100 stores. Let's go find some stores. And I went to my team and said, guys, we're going to go as fast as we can until we break everything. And that's exactly what we did.
Just to make sure I understand, when you say all organic, you mean 0 acquisitions?
Correct.
Wow. So you triple or quadrupled in size, essentially.
In a year.
In 2010?
Yep.
Now, a fortuitous time to grow in the real estate market. I will say you probably negotiated leases that you would never get today. So good for you for accomplishing that. You mentioned there's 5 things that a CEO should be doing, and that's it. You mentioned number 1, hire the right team. Number 2, manage key relationships. I mean, you might as well give us 3 through 5 for those who are listening out there.
Yeah, and not in any particular order. So mission, vision, right? Follow me. Here's where we're going. Continue your own education, and then probably one of the more important ones is money, cash. Are you making it? So P&L and cash flow. And a lot of people don't understand, as you, I'm sure, do with small business, your P&L can look great and you can still go bankrupt with cash flow.
I need to give myself a pat on the back for doing a horrendous job of getting into certain businesses that just the P&L can look really pretty and the cash flow can be atrocious. Commercial real estate and urgent cares. I've really done it. I've nailed that part of it. So I can tell you what not 100%. To do from that perspective.
So those are the 5 jobs of a CEO. And as long as you do those 5 jobs really well and you can push everything else off to your team, you will have a much better life and the company will do really well. And key relationships, to be clear, are any of your large customers, any of your large vendors, attorneys, accountants, anybody put you in business, put you out of business, are those key relationships. And right team, I always tell people it's the people who report directly to you and one level below them. You can't get too much further past that because you just waste all your time working on talent.
All right, so back to your story. So 2010, you execute, what'd you say, 90 leases in that one year?
Yeah.
By the time the calendar turns in 11, you're from 32 back up to that 120-ish range.
Yep.
How did the next 15 years look, and what were some of the monumental pivotal moments in that?
That was really hard growth. By the way, the number in my business particularly, the store count between 50 and 100 is kind of like a black hole. It takes a lot of companies out because you're too big to not have an HR person, but you're too small to afford an HR person. You're too big to not have a CFO. You're too small, you're too small to afford it. So you have to make these investments. So it's a real strain on your P&L and cash flow. So we wanted to get past that right away, which is why I just said, let's just go fast and do it. And we were literally opening, multiple stores per week.
The operators that are listening to this, which we do have several that currently work with us at Zig, or maybe you're considering working with us at Zig to help them scale. Fascinating information, right? To go from 50 to 100. First of all, valuable gold nugget there. But secondly, how did you know that going into it? Like, obviously you were like, this is going to be a shit show, sort of like a NASCAR wreck, right? Where you just drive straight through the smoke and come out on the other side of it. How did you know that though?
Well, remember, I'd already grown to 102 stores. So I'd already done it once, right?
There you go.
So I knew I needed to get back because I already got past that 100 point. I already had that HR person and the CFO and all those people. Going back to 32, I'm like, well, I have to get back over the 100 or my whole structure is going to just go back in time and die off. And then I knew that Apple iPhone was going to come to Verizon, I believed, and I wanted to get big enough to be able to sell it because I thought that was going to be important. It turned out all the agents got it, but I did get into the national program with Verizon. And then from there, we started acquisitions. And I became a deal junkie. I love acquiring companies. And so I bought a company with, 10 doors, and then I bought another company with 50 doors. And then, from there, I kept going until we got up to about 250 stores in 2015. And we decided, my brother wanted to retire from the medical space. So I decided to put the company up for sale. And the whole reason we went to sell it is because Dave wanted to retire. And we always said, pigs get happy, hogs get slaughtered. And so we don't need to be a hog. Let's sell the company and, take our chips off the table. Because we basically, in our analogy, we've been playing blackjack and doubling down and doubling down and doubling down. And we never took any money.
I suspect the lion's share, if not all of, the lion's share of your net worth was in the business, just like any other entrepreneur, right? 99%.
Yeah. You're stupid, 95% probably. But so we put the company up for sale. We ended up merging with Z Wireless. We were A Wireless at the time. We merged with Z Wireless. We became, you'll love this name, A to Z Wireless. Very creative. Mind blowing, right?
Yeah, so, almost as creative as the flag that you see behind me, Zucker Investment Group. Just
I love it.
Riveting stuff there.
So, by the way, we also have Balot Investment Group, which is big. So I think our name's a little cooler. So we acquired merged together, with Z Wireless. And then, with that, we partnered with private equity, and I retired, moved to Florida and retired for a few years.
What were the shares of A Wireless versus Z Wireless?
So Dave and I had 100% of A Wireless.
Sure.
And once we merged, we kept 20% of the combined entity.
10 each or 20 each?
I always owned 55% of what we have in the cell phone business. Dave had 45.
So 11. So you had 11 and he had 9?
Correct.
So give or take. Okay. So Z was big compared to you.
Well, no, actually they weren't. They stroked us a check. And we also took an owner's note to help them out a little bit back then too. So then what the combined company, the goal was to put it together and sell it within 6 months to a bigger PE firm. So the other PE firm was on the last bit of their thing. We were a national player with 250 stores. They had another player who had 350 stores. That was a regional player. We merged together, 600 stores roughly, and then flipped it to Lone Star within 6 months. And so at that point, like I said, I was retired, still available to support the business on 20%, but was not active in the day to day.
Okay. And so Lone Star is a private equity firm that bought 600 locations.
So 2015 was a partnership with Atlantic Street Capital and Z Wireless. That's when we merged that together. 2016 is when we sold to from Atlantic Street to Lone Star. And they brought in a different CEO from Z Wireless to run the thing. And the reason they did that is they said, the Atlantic Street, the smaller PE firm, told me that larger PE firms don't like founder-led companies, that they prefer professional leadership. By the way, it turned out to not be true, at least in the case of Lone Star. But so I was retired and enjoying life was the plan. And my COO was going to really run the business along with their CEO, who he had a great resume according to them at the time. He worked at AT&T for years, and then you'll love this, he was the COO for Blockbuster Video and then Radio Shack.
Nice.
I can't figure out why he wasn't successful. And so he didn't last very long. He lasted about 2 years. The PE firm called me up because I was chairman of the board as well and asked me to come back for 6 months for a few months while they did a search. So I came back and bridged for a few months as they did a search. They then hired the next CEO, guy I really liked named George. George ran the company for another 2 years. Again, wasn't as successful as I was. And George and the company kind of mutually agreed to leave at the same time. George actually, by the way, went on, one of the luckiest guys I know. He went on to run GameStop as the CEO of GameStop. And he got there right before the meme stock. He was supposed to get a package that was worth like $10 million. This is all public information. If he hit 5 metrics, he hit 0 metrics and cashed out $179 million because the stock went from like $3 to $400 overnight. Just hit the lottery. Lucky guy. Off topic. So George leaves. The company asked me to step in for 6 months this time to run the company while they do a nationwide search. Well, at 5 months, they came to me and said, Rich, we actually like the way you're running the business and we can see the trajectory. We'd like you to stay. And so when I came back in 2019, so 4 years after I sold, I was told, and by the way, I had helped the company buy a few other businesses in between there. So we were actually up to, right around 850 stores. I was the M&A guy, so they'd bring me in to negotiate the deal. So I would come in and negotiate the deals, and then they would implement them. And my implementations prior to that were super successful. The last 2 implementations were not, because the CEOs didn't know how to merge the culture. And so when I came back in 2019, I had really 4 companies with one name, if that makes sense. So they were running as one corporate office, but they were running the show as 4 separate pods. And so I fixed that, merged it together. The CEO at the time, our budget that year was to hit $118 million of EBITDA. And the CEO, April 1st, 2019, told me, Rich, you'll be lucky if you hit 99. So I took it over. Of course, that year we did 119 million of EBITDA. So we hit the goal, which is why Lone Star said, Rich, we'd like you to stay as CEO. My wife, of course, keeps reminding me that I told her I'd only be back for 6 months. I keep telling her I never told her which 6 months. So we're still there. So 2019, I'm back. We hit the budget that year. I stay. Lone Star and I had a great relationship. I grow the company and I end up doing so well. We double EBITDA over the next 2 years without any acquisitions. So they're ecstatic with me. They put the company up for sale, just about double, from the 99 to like 185, something like that. So put the company up for sale, and we had some really good offers from some huge PE firms, but they all wanted me to stay for 5 years minimum, like really crazy contracts, like wanted me to roll over, lots of money. And if I left, I lose it all. And so I went to my brother and I said, Dave, I got this crazy idea. Why don't we buy the company back? And he said, can we do it? And I said, well, we'd have to raise like $75 million. He said, do you think you can do that? And I said, yeah, I think I could do that. He said, well, then let's do it.
We're still in 2019.
This is 2021 now. Sorry.
2021. Sorry, go
Ran
ahead.
the company 2 years, 2021, PE puts us up for sale. And in November 21st, 2021, my brother and I bought the company back for over $1 billion. We had transportable bonds, so it made it real easy. So our equity check was fairly small, and we rolled over a lot of money. And so, but we kind of doubled down once again and said, let's do it. We had to raise that money, and it took me 24 hours to raise $150 million. So I had to actually disappoint some of my friends and say, sorry, I don't need your money to buy the company back.
Who and how did you get that money?
I was really blessed. One of the guy who owned Z Wireless, Kevin, was still involved, owned a percentage. I called him. He was willing to roll. So that was a chunk of it. And then I met these guys, the Donanis, through the sale process, that they'd been kicked out of the sale process because they couldn't move fast enough. I really liked them. They owned a bunch of fast food QSRs, like 2,000 plus of them. I called them up and they were willing to come in as a partner. Fantastic guys out of Sugar Land, Texas. And so I brought them in as partners. I let a few friends in for really minuscule amounts of money just to be, kind of token numbers to help them out. But really it was just myself, my family, Kevin's family, and the Donanis are, 98% of the capital structure.
I'm going to give you shit because I can, and we're good friends.
Yeah.
What's a minuscule amount of money for your LP friends?
Oh gosh, I hate that I even said that. Yeah, $500,000 and like $2 million.
Okay, so it's actually not nearly as egregious as I thought it could have been. You're off the hook. That's not terrible. And the cap stack of a deal of this transaction, I think anybody would agree that is minuscule.
Yeah. So
in fairness to you,
actually, I take it back. One guy did put in $5 million. So
got it. That tracks.
So we bought the company back in November of 21, and then several months later, in April of 22, I purchased 650 stores for just over $600 million from Go Wireless. And that's where we sit today, roughly, 1,500 stores. If you add it all up, we've opened stores, closed stores. There's always, when you have a fleet this size, you're constantly grooming the fleet, shutting down low performers, opening new performers that hopefully take over.
You could shut down 20 stores and that would sound like a lot, but it's 1%.
I could shut down 100 stores and my bottom 100 stores are less than 1% of my EBITDA. Right. So it's very top weighted. And I do that. Like literally I'm shutting down 100 stores over the next year because I'm not in business for how many stores I have. I'm in business for how many profitable stores I have.
Amen to that.
And so that's what I'm doing.
So what's the percentage of the company that you and your brother own now that you guys have bought it?
51%, just over 50%, close to 51.
It's so interesting. Like you're in this multiple round cycle of doing the same thing over and over again. The only thing that changes is the numbers are materially bigger.
Oh yeah.
But I think I'm not going to say anything that's hopefully doesn't embarrass you too much, but like you don't have to do this.
No.
It's fair. Why? And what's keeping you motivated and what does the future hold for you?
Yeah. So look, when I came back in 2019, I really came back for my employees. As the main reason I came back because I felt horrible because they hadn't received their bonus in several years. And very, very rarely do I not pay a bonus for me. I mean, I've only missed bonus, I think 2 years ever for my employees. So I felt bad for them. And I felt like the company was going to go out of business if I didn't fix it. That's what I came back for originally. For my family side, we like to do a lot of charitable work. So the way I see it today is the more money I make, the more money I can give away. And I don't believe in handouts. I believe in hand-ups, but we pick our certain areas of focus. I don't have enough money. I'm not, Bill Gates or Warren Buffett to change the world, but I do have enough to have a big impact on Eastern Carolina where I live. And so we're doing some pretty cool things with that trying to, help give back. And look, my kids are going to be taken care of, but I don't want to have spoiled kids. Entitled assholes is what I tell them they're not allowed to become. And I do everything in my power to make sure they don't become entitled assholes. It's hard to teach hunger. You can't teach hunger. But we're doing everything we can to keep them, figuring out their value in life and what they can contribute to the world and teach them the work ethic. So, but for us, I love what I do. I mean, honestly, I am so much happier running the company than I was when I was retired. I retired at 37 years old. You can only go fishing with 80-year-olds so many times hearing about prostate problems in your 30s before you're like, what the hell am I doing? And that's really, I was like, what am I doing? I'm dying here. And I started opening up a bunch of other businesses. I own a lot of companies too, right? I mean, we talk about the cell phone business, but we own hotels. We own a lending company. We owned a golf cart LSV business that we sold last year. I own a bagel shop, as you know, in Greenville, North Carolina. We own a restaurant down in Ocracoke and a hotel there called the Jolly Roger, which is
hell yeah, great place.
Iconic, yeah.
Would highly recommend.
Yeah.
If you could ever figure out where Ocracoke is, it's worth going to.
They say it's the next Martha's Vineyard. That's what I keep hearing. So
there you go.
You can only get there by boat or by small plane though, or helicopter. But yes, so I mean, we're doing all these, other businesses. I was building all these small businesses but when I went back to my main business and had this huge company, I love it. And with the skills that I learned from Mark and YPO and my forum, I honestly believe I could run any company in the world today. Size-wise, I know what it takes to run a business. You have to learn the individual, basics of that business, but the concepts of business are the same for everywhere. I just have to learn what makes that business special. And I truly believe that. And I love working. I love what I do. And I love being able to give back and share the knowledge. I try and speak to students at least once a month as well, whether I've talked to like third graders all the way up to, master students. By the way, the third graders were my favorite. The teacher got so upset with me in a good way, right? So I'm talking to this third grade class, entrepreneurship class for third grade. And a kid says to me, Mr. Balot, we're doing a competition for a lemonade stand. If you had to do a lemonade stand, what would you do different? And I said, well, that's easy. I wouldn't, lemonade stand, you're only allowed to do it for a few hours. They said, yeah. And I said, I would sell tickets for, for $1 each. That's a pre-paid purchase of lemonade. And then I'd sell those for like a month or so prior to the one day I do the stand. And this way, you can expand your sales days, and you're going to have what's called breakage, where a lot of people don't show up to actually get the lemonade. So it's pure profit. And the teacher called me because the next day they had 20 kids show up with their own tickets, handmade, for their lemonade stand, hitting up every teacher in the school for $1 ticket to buy lemonades. So
I love that.
I was proud.
I love that. You should be. So it's interesting. You talk about how, as we work toward wrapping up here in a second, like you talk about how you love teaching and giving back and sharing the information that you've learned. Give fellow operators or entrepreneurs like yourself back, in the mid to late 90s, or even as a teenager, advice for someone who's less than 5 years into their journey.
When you screw up, and we all screw up eventually, don't give up, right? The difference between the entrepreneurs like myself, who I know who are very successful, and the ones who I hear who went out of business, is when we stumble, the real entrepreneurs push through it. They don't stop. They figure out a way. It doesn't matter what it is. You just don't stop. And that is the difference between really succeeding and breaking through, or a lot of people that you hear about that, small businesses fail. It's because they hit their first roadblock and they give up instead of figuring out a way to fight through it. And that's the biggest advice I can give you. And the second thing is get a coach, right? Whether you're a small business and you just call it a mentor, or you're a bigger business and you can afford to pay for somebody. As soon as you're hitting $1 million a year in revenue, you should be paying for a coach. Tiger Woods had a coach. Michael Jordan had a coach. Why the hell do business people think we're so good that we don't need coaches? Get a coach. It makes your life so much faster, so much easier. You have somebody to lean on, and then continue your education through groups like YPO. It's more than one tip, but those are the big ones that I think make the biggest difference.
They're all welcome, and thank you for sharing them. Outside of coaches, mentors, and people, what resources or books, or what's maybe one book that you would share that you're just like, hey, you got to read this?
I'm a huge fan of Jim Collins. Good to Great and Built to Last, and all those books are fantastic. And then look, my coach Mark wrote some really good books that are about the 5 things that I talked about earlier, and the philosophies about how he grows a business. And so I think Mark Moses has some good books. And then if you need sales books, there's a guy named Jack Daly, I think, writes some of the best sales books there are, particularly for business to business sales. There's so many fantastic books out there, exponential growth, things like that, 10X, and there's just a bunch.
When you do decide to actually hang it up and you guys make that next exit, or you take the company public and they bring in another CEO, however your story at Victron particularly ends, which will certainly be on your own terms at this point, and the news articles, publications come out, what do you want those things to say about you and your legacy as you exit?
Yes, I was Entrepreneur of the Year in the Southeast U.S. for Ernst & Young, and yes, I've done this award and that award and whatever. To me, none of that matters. What I want him to say is he was a good guy, and he gave back to others. And that's as simple as it is, right? If I can people know that I'm a good guy, and that I really care about other people, I think that's going to be that. And then ideally they say he was a great father. And that'll be a much longer judging, right? And then to see where my kids end up, and, hopefully they all do well. I worry more about that than probably anything I ever will in business. It's all about what you can do for the world, right? I tell my kids, find a place that you can feel fulfilled and give back to society, contribute to the world. So I hope they can say Rich really contributed to make Eastern North Carolina, which is where I picked, a better place, and helped out a lot of people across the world through business coaching and advising, doing podcasts like this.
Rich, I can tell you, I've seen you as a father. I've seen you as somebody who is living out every letter of those words that you just uttered. I'm certainly a beneficiary as a mentee, friend, super fortunate to call someone like you a friend, and can't thank you enough for joining us on the show and providing the insane amount of valuable insight that every listener that will partake in this has. So thank you again for joining me.
My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.